I'm here today with Grizz Grim, and we're going to see where we go with this. I met Grizz Grim only via the YouTube world from Paul Vanderklay's Twitter feed, actually. And so I've been kind of enamored of some of the comments Grizz makes because they seem to fly right over the top of my head, and I'm hoping to explore that a little bit more today. But Grizz, before we get started, I wonder if you would tell me your story, because I don't really know that much about you, and I think our viewers would also profit from getting to know you before we start talking about deeper things. For those who are wondering what we're going to be talking about, here are a few of our topics: meaning, character, digital identity, collapsing probabilities, the sacrifice of potential, and power.
Well, I'm Griswold Gaius Grimm of the First Larp Ingression Protocol, and I'm also a YouTube channel guy, thanks to Paul Vanderklay, they need such little encouragement. And as such, since the mind control on this one is going to be very deep for my audience, I roll these things called savings throws, and I'm going to run through that real quick. Everyone gets to pick either survival, social, wisdom, or heart, and that's their number out of the 4 I roll. And if it's over 10, then they take half damage from the mind control on the rest of this episode. But if the number is below 10, they are fully susceptible to what goes on between us here today. The survivalists got a 17, so that's half damage for them. The socialists with an 11. The Sophiologists with an 18. And those who chose heart, a 12. Everybody's gonna take half damage today. I think you protect them in some fashion. My story goes something like I Rip Van Winkled myself in video games from about 20 to 40. And then I came back, I was called back into this material reality by falling in with the truther community. And it's essentially, if you watch YouTube regularly and you fall into that community of watching those videos, that corner of the internet, it's sort of like a visual paranoid schizophrenia. Like they look at current events and assume everyone is lying about them and try to find what's really going on. And eventually that information diet and me no longer mixed, because I made the connection between the Special Victims Unit marathons they used to run on the USA TV network, and I had watched a bunch of those, and at some point it felt like, hey, you're the type of guy who watches Special Victims, and that made me feel awkward. And then the truther community vibe became something very similar, and so I sort of fell into this corner of the internet, which is post Peterson's disappearance, this donut volcano of content providers arose to fill all the hours that his lectures had filled for people who fell into his funnel. And I can say you're probably one of the better ones. So it's a real honor for me I really like the way you bring, like, from left field balls in to, I like the way you bring stochastic resonance to the forefront by like bringing up 11 when you're talking to some musician guy, or that's what I like to do, is like throw balls from left field and see how the people react to them. And you do that, but like on like a hi, I'm a respectable person level. And so,
well, it's not that I'm not consciously bringing in a ball out of left field. It's that my head is inhabited by this picture that's got all these parts, and I'm trying to put all the parts together in some sort of a coherent whole. So when I hear somebody else talk about something that relates to one of those parts, I just bring it out to see, does this slot into that, you know? And it's that's just part of my process.
Yeah, that's sort of for me, there's an information war going on, and a competitive marketplace for attention. But like, there are things that stick in our memory after we watch them, like leaves on a memory tree, and our monkey mind will jump around the memory tree and then come to the bring a collection of leaves to the conversation. And yours are fascinating. Like, I stole that one crypt, like you got onto 11 with the frog skin abominations and how they, and so that one was one. And then the stochastic resonance one from, like, I deep dived or scrolled down to the bottom of your channel and found that one. But it just came to me like, as like, this is what she does, and she might be able to understand me way better than everybody else in the corner because of all those things floating around in your mind.
Well, so what you've told me so far gives me from 20 to 40, but you're obviously a person of great intellect. So who were you before you disappeared into the video game world?
I was someone who ended up going to elementary school a year sooner than all of my conspecifics. And so once high school finished, I said, well, I'm going to take a year, so I'll be as old as everybody else. And that turned into being a Walmart employee and having my spirit broken. And I got into medical transcription because the pathologist at the hospital didn't want to pay a transcriptionist wages. So they pulled me off the street and taught me how to do it. And then from then on, that was the highest paying gig I could get. And so I would do that during the day and then enter this digital realm at night. And now this digital realm is a place where everyone's spending a whole lot of time.
Would you say that that might be because your intellect wasn't being properly stimulated, and that's why you disappeared into the digital realm? I mean, do you think if you had made the decision to go on to some form of higher education right out of high school, that you think that would have made a difference? Or do you think you just were kind of on that track towards a kind of I don't know, would you call that a nihilism when you disappeared into the digital world? Or was it just boredom or looking for excitement? Or what do you think sent you there?
It was the time when massively multiplayer online games were just starting.
Is that like a digital form of Dungeons and Dragons, or
like World of Warcraft and such? It was the networking
listen,
power.
you're gonna have to. I'm dumb enough that I have heard of World of Warcraft, but I don't know exactly how it works. But I'm assuming it's something like a role-playing kind of a game where everybody has a part, but you
control an avatar, and that's your embodiment in that realm. But when these things were coming out, it was the first time we were able to network across the internet rather than locally. Like, I had already played video games in a house with 4 computers networked together, but being able to do it with people all over the globe was exciting.
Well, so let me ask one more question though about World of Warcraft. So does the digital environment add anything to the game, or is it still that the internal imaginations of each player as they're moving themselves around in this virtual world that you create as a group of players? Are you kind of creating your own game, or is there a game there that you're playing?
In the case of World of Warcraft, it's very tailored to give you an experience. Like there's boundaries. You go on missions and raids, and they set it up so things are multiplayer for people to do together. But it's a handcrafted experience. Each mission. It's not a sandbox type game. The one that I got sucked into was a spaceship one where I was flying around as a fighter pilot, and they had no crafted story. So it was only us making the storyline. And that I was meeting people from Europe and whatnot was exciting to me at the time. So that helped hold me in as well.
And so that feels like real relationships with people, I suppose.
Absolutely. There's an anecdote I have from the space game days where one of my wingmen in my squad, who I flew in combat with all the time, had an appendix problem, and he, like, in the hospital, he's calling, like, screaming to people in the real world about his wingmen in some space universe that nobody understood. In the delirium of the fever from the appendicitis or whatever.
Yeah, because that world becomes very real to you.
It's the bonds and the experiences are still sharing experience with other human beings. So that part's just as real. But the experience is a simulation, falls away. And like there was points where it was more important to me what I was doing in that universe than surviving in this one. And I think that was like 20 years ago. Now it's getting like humans get better at whatever they do, and now we're getting better at synthetic experiences that are more stimulating or engaging than people misattuned to the reality.
Do you ever get a little bit worried about this little corner of the internet that we're doing the same thing?
This is a video game.
I know, you know what I mean, because we get to know each other. We're developing these virtual relationships. We talk to each other on Twitter. We talk to each other through these videos. We get these high-level intellectual conversations going that are very stimulating. And then we drop back into the real world and nobody knows what we're talking about or how to interact with us. And our family members kind of look at us like, who are you? You know?
I think we're pioneers. Like for me, the visualization is a channel on YouTube, etc., is a ship. And like the Discord community that builds around one is sort of like the inside of the ship. But everyone is sending their attention to these fake places. But when the attention combines, it becomes a real experience, a real shared experience. And that's, I like to think that favorably for our situation is that what we're doing is like the top down and the bottom up are colliding. It's like 50, 60 years ago, like none of the knowledge of the world or like through a newspaper was the only way the knowledge of the greater reality would seep into a local community. And now it's the integration is happening and it's having really chaotic effects on the population.
So in some way, our shared attention looking towards a higher goal is we've got our ship headed in the right direction.
Well, we could be watching music videos or just pleasuring ourselves, but instead we're thinking together towards something. And for me, I like to think there's this, like if I crawl down my memory tree, there's this Joseph Campbell clip that sticks with me. It's how like a tribe would take their young men into, like they'd always have the men of the tribe wear these god masks, and they make them all big and scary. And when the child was old enough, they'd take him in the cave and make him fight him and let him win, and then stick the mask on his face.
Well, this poor kid has to stand up and fight a man with a mask. I'd say he's fighting the god. The man lets the kid win, takes the mask off, puts it on the kid. Now, the mask is not there defeated and simply said, oh, this is just myth. It said the mask represents the power that is shaping the society and has shaped you, and now you are a representative of that power. That's a big story.
And that's an initiation I think our culture in the West has lost, except for, like the Masons. And I think one of the things we're piecing together as we're building in the way we're building or thinking the way we're thinking in this community is like a mask we can hand the generation that's buried in the digital world from age 3 or so now, or 8 at the minimum. So if we can cobble it together and present it to them once we got what we think is worth presenting, I think we can actually make a good help, make a good difference that, for example, I wouldn't be affecting in the world if I was loading dog food on a truck with my time. Although if I was loading dog food on a truck, I could listen and think along that way. But
well, that's one of the interesting things, right? Is that the people that are doing more hands-on kind of work have found that the YouTube educational videos and conversational videos are a way for them to utilize their minds during their working time. So it's greatly expanded the class of people who are thinking about the problem. I'm always reading comments from some guy who says, I'm a truck driver and I listen to Jordan Peterson 10 hours a day, or which reminds me of and this is my memory tree, this is out of left field, reminds me of a comment I read early on when I first started watching Jordan Peterson. It was some guy in, I don't know, let me say Timbuktu. And he said, it amazes me that I sit here in Timbuktu, somebody without a college education, and yet I'm able to listen to this professor in Ontario teach these amazing things. And I'm able to get basically a free college education because he's put all of his courses online. And that comment was followed by 139 replies at the time I read it. And every one of them was, I'm over here in Anaturk. I'm over here in Paris. People all over the world jumping in and saying, we're listening to this guy, we're learning. So basically we're creating a kind of a hive mind, maybe, that's all focused on the same goal, which is, in Peterson's verbiage, the higher goal, the star above the horizon that orients our thinking, orients our perception. His latest video where he talks about perception, he starts talking about that again, how this focusing on this higher goal binds everything together. And that got me thinking about the whole binding problem with whether it's cellular organism or whether it's body shapes or whether it's how to see whether an apple is a whole thing or just a bunch of parts, is all related to that higher goal somehow. That perception is related to that higher goal.
Like the sense of the existence of the vertical.
Yes.
Aligns everything below it.
Yeah. Here's one for you to look up. I just started today listening to a guy that I'd never heard of before, and there's not very much written on the internet about him. His name is Michael Clarage, Clarage. I will put it in the show notes. He's an astrophysicist, but he's also very interested in this whole issue of shape, body parts and shape in general. And he's been researching it for like 20 years, and then he stumbled across Michael Levin's work. And so he has a couple of lectures out where he's talking about Michael Levin's work, but putting it together with his ideas about how this all fits in astrophysics and the greater universe. And he's part of some project called the Sapphire Project. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
SAFIRE. I also can't find out very much about that, which makes me wonder if it's a real thing, a legitimate thing, or if it's
Just a LARP.
Well, no, I mean, the guy and all the people on there have very, very thorough, what would you say, academic credentials. But, you know, sometimes even people with great academic credentials can kind of go off in this kind of interesting direction. So I don't know whether that's what has happened or whether they're just very good at protecting their intellectual property, because they've gone in and scoured Wikipedia. There's no Wikipedia mention of him or of the project or of the theory that the project is working on.
Well, I doubt that Wikipedia has anything good for me yet either. So sometimes things are just emerging or are still too small to have that sort of
Well, this
documentation.
Sapphire Project is not small. They're doing massive scale astrophysics experiments and observations, and they've built a thing called a star in a vacuum or something. I don't know. There's a kitty.
This is Sylvia.
Sylvia?
Mm-hmm.
Sylvia.
She showed up at my door pregnant, and I brought her inside hoping she wasn't and wouldn't be. And I've had kittens that had to be homed.
How many kittens did she have?
5. It was the cast of the OA.
Oh,
That's a complicated LARP.
I miss having cats. I had always had cats when I was younger, but somehow I didn't have cats then for about 10 years. And then when I got around 35 or so, I got allergic to cats. And so now I can't have a cat anymore.
Congratulations.
I love baby kitties.
The maintenance is insane.
Well, we do have a dog. We adopted a dog. Our daughter adopted a dog, and then of course she moved away. So now we have her dog. But it's good for us. Gets us out walking morning and night. So anyway, back to
well, when you brought up the Sapphire Project and Clarage on the shapes, what came to my mind was cymatics almost immediately. And
that's where there's electrical stimulation in the water or something, and it creates these shapes.
Well, most of the videos,
vibrations.
Most of the videos you can find on YouTube will be like sand on a drum, and then as they tweak the vibrations, the sand like will bounce and form different shapes and patterns in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did a episode early in my channel several years ago with a musician, and we were looking at some of those from the sand on the drum and so forth. I think that Rupert Shelldrake has a paper or a video or something online where he has the sand and also water, where they do certain vibrations underneath a little bowl of water, and it shows all these different designs that take place. Which kind of fits in with the Sapphire Project. Well, I don't know about the Sapphire Project. That's on the grand scale. Some idea called the electric universe theory.
Oh, yes.
Have you heard of that?
Big fan.
Okay. Well, this is Michael Clarage. He's part of the electric universe theory universe.
That would explain why you can't find much. It's fascinating how there's a lot of I can watch all sorts of things on YouTube, but some things people just don't talk about, like that, for example. Like it's so anti-mainstream that people like, is this guy a kook? It's like talking about a thing that might be right is too fringe, and like that's what I like about on my channel. This is a fringe encounter. like people who don't know each other, but they do share interest, just getting together and seeing what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And like when I caught that stochastic resonance clip from you, that's exactly like, you never know what chaos is going to elevate the right signal for you.
Yes.
So,
well, so what have you heard about the electric universe theory? Is it worth looking into?
my favorite, I would throw people to who I call Tom with the Weather, which is a reference to a Tool song. There's this guy, Ben Davidson, who watches the sun, has been watching the sun on YouTube for years.
Oh, he has they're like 5 or 10 minute things every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of hypnotic to listen to. I used to listen to him a bit, and then I started to think, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it sounds like he's making stuff up. So
like Fringe wise, he's pole shift and a little disaster pointing. But it's like one of those things where like I can't get respectable people to debunk him. And he's published a textbook from his perspective, so he's trying to be taken seriously. And it's this overlap, like respectful information used to be more siloed, and that I think is kind of collapsing as the two worlds merge.
mm-hmm.
And so part of this, the relevance realization we can do as a community as we're aiming toward the same goal, can really help with that, I think. And I think what I try to do is like underline those, like the what's emerging among us, more than give people something like specific nuggets, although I do that too.
Yeah, no, that really makes sense, because that's one way we can really help each other, is to steer clear of conspiracy theories that just take us down a rat hole that doesn't take us anywhere, right? You can get so, like Jordan Peterson's always talking about ideologies being incomplete religions. A lot of conspiracy theories are like that too. Everything fits so perfectly that you think, oh my gosh, this must be it. But the boundary is too tight. And so there's no place for any interaction with anything outside of it. So you want to be very careful not going down that hole. I guess one of the things that fascinated me about this Michael Clarage is he's got this big project where he's looking at, I think, the electric. Okay, I've only read a little bit of it, and I just started on it this morning, but I think the electric universe theory idea is that the sun gets its power from electron bombardment from the outside, not from thermal energy from the inside, which is a very strange idea. But they're doing experiments to falsify or verify. And that's the big idea. But on a smaller scale, he's interested in shape, because he feels like if there is this electric field that is somehow adding form and meaning in the universe, then that electric field is also operating at a much smaller scale. And so he got interested in watching Michael Levin's stuff, but some of his own research in the past, he had done some work with leaves, where you take, apparently every living thing gives off light. It's very minimal. It's a light that's not observable unless you have special machinery. But supposedly if you put me in a darkened room and then you shine this, not shine, but you use this tool to look at me, my eyes will actually be shining. There'll be a light coming out of my eyes. And they've found that that's the same thing is true even for a leaf. It gives off a certain kind of light. And so when they're looking at this through this, I don't know, spectrograph or some sort of machinery, like I said, I just started looking at it today. You take the leaf and it's got this leaf shape, and then you cut the leaf in half. Well, you put the leaf between two slides and look at it with this machine, and you can see the form of the leaf, the light around the outside of the leaf, which shows you the form of the leaf. Then they cut the top half off the leaf and put it between two completely new slides so that there's no contamination from the previous slide. And they look at it again with the machine, and the whole leaf is still there. So even the part that's cut off, the form is still there. Form is visible.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, and then he went on from there to talk about Michael Levin's work with cutting off the head of the planaria and all of that stuff. And Michael Levin's work does tie into this idea of electrical impulse dictating form, or at least communicating form in some way. So that's why I found him kind of interesting, because he's not just looking at this strange theory about the sun, but he's also bringing it down at every scale. And that's kind of what I'm interested in, is scaling things down, because if it scales all the way down, then you can also scale it all the way up.
It's very hermetic principles, actually.
So I've heard a little bit about that, but not much. That's and kind of in the realm of alchemical, or
most well popularized by the Campbell. They say Hermes Trismegistus wrote it, and it's 8 principles by which to understand the universe: rhythm, polarity, gender. But the first one is all is mind. So that's their basis.
Now, so do you have a link for that? Because I haven't looked into any of that stuff.
I saw a really good video on it not long ago. I'll send it to you via Twitter or something.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great.
See, part of like what I'm trying to accomplish with my lobster monkeys is there's these information processing skill sets, like bringing, like someone who could find the clip of what we were just talking about and run it while we were talking, is a skill set that otherwise over-intelligent, unemployed people could develop. And I think it levels up the whole network. Whether or not it results in any financial gain in any time in the near future is hit or miss. But I think it's important work that we make, that we share the good things we find and throw them in a big pot and see if it's nourishing. More nourishing than Hollywood.
I could not agree more, but I am just not technically proficient enough to do that stuff on my channel. But if anybody wanted to volunteer to do it on my channel, I'm in.
Yeah, okay.
I'll give you all the links.
That's one of the 12 monkeys is finding the stuff worth sharing, and other monkeys get it ready and digestible for other people. And I think we're working together, and as soon as the more we recognize that, the easier it'll be to collaborate. So.
Yeah, you mean to level up the quality of our production?
Not our production, not from that angle, but from the resulting product, the derivative works. For example, I call them eye stalk wiggles because I have this beholder monster from D&D mapping for it. But like, just the series of clip collages have been like the most, like, people make a point by referencing all these different points. And now that we're in this age, we can do it in video clips of those people saying that quote. And that's been the stuff that has changed my thinking most powerfully. So that as a skill is something I'm trying to promote maybe.
Yeah, so that makes total sense. You mean like taking some, I mean, my daughter used to say to me, you should make clips of your channel. Well, I can't do that either. I sort of force people to watch 1.5 hours, which is, useful or not useful. Maybe that's why my numbers are so low. But but sometimes some real nugget comes along, and if I can clip out that 2 or 3 minute thing and put some nice visuals on there, yeah, it would be great. So
yeah, YouTube added a feature. I made a clip of your channel today. So it's a matter of training your audience monkeys to clip for you, because you're a superstar. You shouldn't be spending your time on that. You should be doing what you're doing, having the insightful conversations with people. Like, the talent shouldn't be doing this monkey work, but we need to train the monkeys before we can make that a reality.
That's so funny, thinking of myself as talent. But I'll tell you what, that Wolfgang Smith conversation was really good for me, because I had kind of gotten to where I was thinking, should I keep doing this or not? Like, nobody's watching, woe is me kind of stuff. And then Nate sent me that guy's name, and I followed through and got the conversation. And that gave me enough confidence that I reached out to Michael Levin and John Vervaeke and Stephen Blackwood and Mark Solms again. And I put together a bunch of matchups between these guys. And we've got a lot of good stuff coming down the road.
Yeah, people love crossovers.
Yeah. So I have a crossover with Michael Levin and Mark Solms. They're both on the neuroscience end of Michael Levin's work. And then John Vervaeke and Michael Levin on the cognitive science end of Michael Levin's work and John Vervaeke's work. And then Stephen Blackwood and John Vervaeke. Yeah, I've got a lot of nice matchups coming, so I'm excited about that.
You encountered the demoralization of the view count.
Yes, I did. Well, it wasn't just the view count. I can deal with that because I really believe that the people that are watching are the people that need to be watching. And, what can I do about that? I can't increase the number of people watching. And having big numbers doesn't really matter if people aren't involved, right? But what I couldn't handle was that all of a sudden, all the comments just dropped off the map and there were no comments anymore. So I didn't feel connected to the community. And I think that's where it got like, well, if people aren't commenting, then maybe this isn't valuable to them anymore. And if it's not valuable to them anymore, why am I throwing all this stuff out there? And I think that's what it was, that demoralization that started happening. But part of it, I think I was just tired. I had been traveling and I just was burned out,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm back in the saddle again. But we're here to talk about you, not me. So you had brought up some things that you wanted to talk about, and I'm still interested in talking about those things. Let's tackle this. You had said meaning, character, and digital identity. What was it about those three things that you wanted to say?
Well, I thought you'd ask the best questions for me to help make me more understandable to people, because of all the different nuggets you've collected. You have more angles to see things than most.
Well, so you just start talking and then I'll throw in some questions, because my questions don't arise from an empty sheet. I have to have a little chaos first, and then I can see the patterns.
And take apart what's not necessary.
Yeah.
There's the LARP Ingression Protocol is essentially, now that where we're at as a society and on these digital planes in our free time, everything that's not falsifiable is fair game to believe and or act as if it's true. Like the electric universe theory hasn't been falsified, so we can LARP that that's the case. We can believe that that's the case and operate from that perspective with that frame. I've built the digital identity of Griswold Grimm is based from, you may have heard of Pokemon Go became very popular as a mobile game because
Right.
it was getting Google people to film the inside of their house for Google. But
Well, and you know, in every park and every store and every place in the community. I mean, when it first came out, there were just herds of people everywhere with their phones looking around for the Pokemon.
its predecessor is a game called Ingress, which is about two teams, red and blue, enlightened and resistance, fighting for mind control of the human population. And it was supposedly developed by someone who left the either intelligence agencies or Department of Defense to make it. And it required people to turn their GPS devices on their phones on to play. And early on in the game, like agents who you became when you started playing the game were to submit places to be portals. And those places were like, I think the post offices were automatically a place. And then like any place there was human expression, like statues in a park, anything beautiful to draw people to, was supposedly like a portal. This exotic material came through in the game. And so once I heard that ISIS was targeting cultural, like historical and cultural landmarks, it felt like we're doing an ISIS targeting thing by creating these portals. Like any place humans had shaped and expressed themselves in the walkabout world, we were reporting to this game was a place where humans had shaped things. And there was a point when I was playing when I got an overlap clip from the movie Crow, where he says, "Victims, aren't we all?" But it crossed over into shapers, aren't we all? Like I realized that if I went to the gazebo in the park and captured a portal, I was shaping another human being or multiple other human beings to come flip it back. I was like shaping what happened in the real world while playing a game. And so those things map deeply into what I'm doing now. And the digital identity is that at one such portal, a shaper came through and inhabited my body. The body of this poor NPC fellow who was a medical transcriptionist. And so that's the LARP. And now I get to talk to Karen Wong on the Meaning Code. It's beautiful.
When you were talking about that, what popped into my head, and like I said, I just talked about what pops into my head. What popped into my head was some more of Michael Levin's work, where they have found that if there's, well, first of all, it's a very mysterious thing that cells know where to put the body organs, whether to put them on the left side or the right side of the body, and how they all fit together. And, you know, all of that is very mysterious when you start out with a bunch of undifferentiated cells. But so there's something about the left and right sides of a body, of any sort of organism. The left and right sides are very important. If something goes wrong with something on one of the sides, like let's say you have an injury in your right leg, there's actually an electric signal on the left leg in the same spot that identifies that there's a problem in the other leg. And he said that eventually they hope to get to a place where they can find these signals more easily in some other part of the body that's more accessible, like maybe in your spit. That they could just take spit and look at spit, and they'd be able to tell which parts of the body are needing attention. That's kind of mind-blowing, isn't it?
Well,
because it's too hard when you get into a human body, it's too hard to look through all the layers of cells to get the information down deep inside a human body. But if they can learn how those signals are being generated, then eventually they should be able to get to the place where they can take something that's easily accessible, like spit, and find the signal in there of what's wrong in all the various parts of the body.
First thing that occurred to me when you were speaking on that is Bruce Lipkin, I think is his name. And he talks about.
I used to watch him a long time ago, but I can't remember anymore what it was.
I remember him for stem cells and caterpillars.
Yeah,
And how the most sticky memory of him is the imaginal cells. That like when a caterpillar dissolves, there's a special cell that I guess imagines being a butterfly that makes the rest of it possible. The second
I didn't know that they called them that. I knew that when a caterpillar goes into the, chrysalis or whatever it is, wraps itself up in, that
the goo phase.
It completely goes to goo. There's nothing left of the original caterpillar, and there's seemingly no information in there that would tell it how to produce a butterfly. But even more interestingly, if you train the caterpillar to do something or teach it a certain path or something, when it becomes a butterfly, it will still know that path. So the mentation or the cognition or whatever you want to call that developed in the caterpillar is still there even after everything has turned to goo and then rebuilt again.
For all we know, it could be reception of Akashic records that we map onto memory, what we have access to in the Akashic records, and different pieces can flow down. And that's like one of the gray zones.
Yeah, okay. I have avoided anything that's a lot. I will look into it, but I don't know. I avoid things that look like that.
Shouldn't have to.
Yeah.
We have people who look into that for you. We'll bring anything good. The second thing I thought of when you were speaking of the left and right forms thing was that theoretically it's all in the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's operating, if that has its own magnetic field that we can learn to read, the way our heart has a magnetic field that we can learn to read, that may be where that level of information is transmitted.
Yeah, well, theoretically, there's nothing in the DNA itself that tells where to put the body parts. That's why Michael Levin's work is so important, because they always wondered, how did these undifferentiated cells know where to go to build the leg or to build the eye or to build the heart? And he discovered this bioelectric communication, that the cells talk to each other and they say something like, you go over there and you build an arm, and you go over there and you build an eye. But then he also said something very mysterious that he's never really dug into, and nobody's ever asked him, as far as I can find. He said, and then when they get there, they have this subroutine that's already prepared so that the eye can be built. They don't talk to each other about how to build an eye. They just talk about where to put the eye, and then the subroutine kicks in. What, subroutine? Come on, are you kidding me? There's just a little package that goes bing, and then it decompresses, and out comes all the architecture to build an eye.
Well, that's presumptuous, right? That there is a subroutine.
Well, I mean, he used the word subroutine.
But if we're looking at bioelectric signaling in a potentially electric universe, then there's no reason we shouldn't think that information is being transmitted to those cells, not from each other, but from the vertical. Yes,
exactly. And that's part of what Michael Clarage was talking about when he, in this lecture that I'm going to put in the show notes, he even was talking about like snowflakes, that there's no reason that snowflakes are the way that they are. And his thinking is that the snowflake forms inside of this electrical field. And that's why it gets the shape that it gets, because, you know, snowflakes are all unique. Which brings up another thought. I've been listening to Stephen Wolfram in some of his process conversations that he has with different scientists, because he's exploring how his theory works out in biology or in chemistry or in multicellular organisms and that kind of thing.
Okay, when you say his theory, to me that means like pockets of intelligibility. Is there another angle that you mean when you say that?
Yes, well, okay. Wolfram's main theory is that the entire universe is built from a rule that is generating space and time. And space is made up of, all of reality is made up of atoms of space. Now, he's using atoms loosely there, but space itself is just these points. And the points are generated by the rule. Points, he calls them nodes. So there's a node and an edge that goes to the next node. And then when certain conformations arise out of those points and nodes, the rule will say, well, when you get this shape, change it to this shape. And so maybe add a node, and then that means that you have to add some edges. Mark Jeffrey of The Last Theory has simplified it and done some beautiful visuals to show how the theory works. But this very simple rule will generate a very complicated universe. So that's Wolfram's theory. He is exploring his theory by talking to biologists, chemists, trying to understand whether or not his theory could connect with them. So he'll have these working projects where he'll be talking for like 3 hours with these guys, and they're just exploring ideas. Well, would this work? Would that work? What if we did this? You know, does this show up if we do that? You have to listen to hours of it where nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, some little spark will fly out. Well, he's taken to calling these atoms of space, he calls them an Eme, E-M-E, like a meme, but without the M. And the Eme, he's talking with this other guy about Emes, and the other guy says, well, but the Emes have to be unique, otherwise the universe would collapse. And at first, Wolfram is arguing with him a little bit, and then they both come to the conclusion, no, that's right. Every Eme has to be unique. Otherwise, the universe collapses, because of all the, if the atoms of space are identical, as many of them would be if you were looking at the standard particle physics standard model, because in the standard model, there's somewhere between 14 and 25 particles that make up the whole universe. That would mean a lot of those particles would not be unique, right?
If they have free will. Sorry.
Well, anyway, going back to this Emes being unique, all the Emes have to be unique. Otherwise, so part of the uniqueness, I suppose, could be their location, their trajectory, and every Eme would have its own location. So that would be part of its uniqueness. But that's also, so there's also an identity to every Eme in Wolfram's theory. Now, I'm not saying Wolfram's theory is right, but I find it interesting to follow him because his theory does take you to some places that usually physics doesn't look and doesn't want to think about. There's a lot of implications. underlying Wolfram's theory that I'm not even sure he recognizes yet, because
Like, what if the rule is the word?
yes. And well, he tried to get around that by saying, yeah, but it's not just some special rule. We don't have to say it's a special rule. We could say it's all possible rules being implemented in all possible ways. But to me, that doesn't help any, because that's the same problem we run into with the many worlds theory, right? Then you end up having to have a world generating machine that generates all the worlds. You just keep infinite regress,
Well,
So
it's hard to fill infinity. So, like, where reality is a fish tank and we choose where we swim, like, because the probability collapse. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about is and how it relates to sacrifice, because anything you choose to do is a sacrifice of all your other possible realities. You're choosing not to experience all billions of possibilities when you're experiencing whatever it is you're experiencing. And recognizing that sacrifice, like, definitely helps you make better use of your free time.
I mean, obviously, that's one of the principles that goes all the way down to the bedrock of the universe, right? I mean, one of the things that got me thinking the way that I think is that years ago, 1981, I went to an economics conference on Austrian economics. Actually, I got a scholarship to attend a 1 week long
Symposium, they call us.
Well, it was the most amazing week that I had at that time. Certainly, I was newly elected to the legislature, and because of that, I got a scholarship to go. It was in upstate New York at this old mansion, and the Foundation for Economic Education was funding these things every year to have a week-long conference with some of the greatest minds in Austrian economics, and you could sit at their feet and learn from them and live in this old mansion while you're there. I mean, it was all expenses paid. It was just amazing. I can still remember sitting around these tables with these people and the kind of glow of the light around me and just how lovely it was. And some of the things I learned there, I've never forgotten. But one of the things that occurred to me, because I was also a very new Christian at the time, it occurred to me when they were talking that free market economics is a principle that's built into the universe, and it's something that scales everywhere. And this opportunity cost thing is a principle of economics that scales everywhere, right? It certainly scales with this whole idea of sacrifice, of making one choice means that all the other choices disappear. It's Jordan Peterson standing on the threshold of the infinite possibilities in front of you and having to find your way through. The only way you can do that is by looking at this higher goal, and then everything will kind of make a shape in front of you for you to follow. And it's a mystically beautiful picture.
I object to your only.
Only. What was the only? Where did I throw in an only?
That when you're standing on the edge of infinite possibilities, the only way to make your way through.
Oh. Yes, the best way to, let's say the best way.
There you go. That I can get on board with. But you can definitely just float.
Yes.
The river of time takes us through one way or the other.
Yeah, well, you've gained a deep wisdom by that floating process, Grizz.
I hope so. I hope it all pans out to be worth something to everybody else on the way. I like being useful.
Yeah, do you want to talk about that at all?
About liking.
I mean, I don't want to dig too deep, but it seems there might be some pain stuck in there, and
I have some hindrances. I have an irreverence hindrance that makes things difficult. One of me was in high school, and it was the first ever philosophy class they offered, and we all had our own. We had to bring our own, and mine was that, like, essentially you don't know what 10's really like unless you know what -4 is like. And so going through that path has taken me down some nihilistic roads, and I think redemption's a thing, and probably one of the better, higher goals one can have from various positions in life. So
Yep. Well, I mean, one of the amazing things is that redemption truth, yeah, both. That redemption truth is so deeply true that it rewrites everything. And once you grasp that,
you do have a shot at redemption.
yes. And it's a gift, and all gifts have to be opened up and taken in and explored. And so it may not be an instantaneous poof, like the zip compression goes off and I'm just all filled up with this redemption. It may take a while. For me, it took a long time before I really grasped what that meant. But when I grasped it, it just sort of went back in time and rewrote everything, all the garbage of my younger years and everything, just got all rewritten into this thing that became meaningful and gave me a foundation from which to move forward, right? And I was rewatching one of John Vervaeke's videos. I think it was his video on agape. And he was telling the story of, in Iris Murdoch's book, The Sovereignty of the Good. Did you happen to see that episode that I did on Iris Murdoch with Matt?
I didn't.
Okay, I will put it in the, I'll put it in the show notes. Iris Murdoch was, Matt introduced me to her, because I don't know any philosophy, but she was a philosopher sometime in the last 100 years. I think she probably died only maybe 10 or 20 years ago. And she tells this story in her book. I only roughly remember it, but John reminded me of this mother-in-law who did not like her daughter-in-law at all, was completely irritated by her. The daughter-in-law was coarse and mouthy, and she was having a really hard time developing a relationship with the daughter-in-law, because obviously it was obvious to the daughter-in-law that no matter how nice the mother-in-law tried to be, it was obvious to the daughter-in-law that she wasn't loved or appreciated by this mother-in-law. And I don't remember what the mechanism was, but some way or another, the mother-in-law either decided or somehow got a shift in perspective. I don't remember the trigger, but her perspective shifted, and all of a sudden she could see a different reality, that instead of the daughter-in-law being coarse, she was fresh. Instead of her being mouthy, she was expressive. She was able to see these things from the other side. And all of a sudden it completely altered not only her view of her daughter-in-law, but her view of herself. She probably saw herself as being critical and judgmental and, unable to see the goodness in other people. And that insight made her rethink everything in her life, and it gave her a completely new perspective of everything that she looked at. So this one insight can rewrite your whole life, right? And I sent John an email and I said, here's Michael Levin talking about how this little chemical wash can change this organism so that it goes off and does this instead of what it was going to do. It's that same impulse, right? It's this one little thing that can rewrite everything afterwards. I'm sure it works both ways. You could get an insight that would drive you down a wrong direction, or you can get this other insight that will transform your life. And to me, redemption is that. And maybe within redemption, there are many, many sparks like that, many insights. I think the word is like that. When you're reading God's word, some little insight will just, and it will rewrite the way you think about everything day after day after day. And I think that's why we're supposed to be in the word consistently, because it's always, building new truth into our lives. You're making me talk too much, Grizz.
I don't know. That was deep. I'm glad we went there.
I think you're a good interviewer, but I'm supposed to be interviewing you.
It's the Fringe encounter. What happens, happens.
Yeah. So meaning, identity, digital identity, and character, collapse of probabilities.
I guess if we wanted to lean into digital identity, I'm greatly concerned that to the extent we are evolved monkeys, there's never been an experiment before where we spend so much time staring into little boxes. And I think the boxes ignore all of our being except our eyes, ears, and intellect. And that as such, we are in grave danger of being disembodied within ourselves, as there being a disconnect between our bodies and our identities. And that's why I think Paul Vanderklay and friends should push Paintball for Jesus to help re-embody the disembodied youth.
So what is paywall for Jesus? I have
Paintball for Jesus.
Oh, paintball. No wonder it didn't make sense.
You can paint the walls as well. Paint the wall for Jesus.
No. I thought you said paywall.
Oh, paywall for Jesus. You want the good stuff, you're going to have to pony up. I have a patron. Those shirts, look at this. Just tickle my going.
Yeah, I thought that didn't make sense. So, almost as much as paintball for Jesus is not really speaking to me. What does that mean?
It means like churches seem to be content taking in the people who finally come around, and they need to be revivified with the youth who are currently being seduced into the digital realm in multitudinous ways, and that they would benefit from being embodied. And one way to do that would be if churches sponsored a paintball team where like 6 players from the Baptists and 6 players from the Methodists would face off in paintball for Jesus, where all of the competitors were members of the churches, because like paintball is not free and there's lots of poor kids. So.
Well, I mean, on the one hand, I think, yes, of course. But my observation over the years that I've been a believer has been that one of the downfalls of the youth programs in churches is that they've focused everything on having fun instead of making faith something worth dying for.
Yep.
Well, I do think there has to be some way to make to reach the young people that are right now trapped in the gaming world. I mean, that I personally know of young men in my friend community where the young men have gotten so trapped in that they've had psychotic breaks and it's affected their entire future. you know, at the age of 17, 18 years old, because they stay up all night gaming, and then they go to school, and then they just can't identify reality anymore. And especially because they're so exhausted all the time, and they're overusing their brain and their visual and, you know, repetitive motion, everything. And they get wired wrong, and then they're just rewired wrong. No medication can help that. Once it gets kind of past a certain edge, they're just sort of lost in that world. And I think that some sort of activity that is more enticing. What is that though? I mean, is paintball the thing?
That's where it came to me, is because it was in my, like, paintball was the closest to the kick I got from playing Overwatch, which is team-based combat video game. And so that's why I thought of it as a selling point. And I spent most of my life in Middle America Bible Belt. So there's like in this town, there's about as many churches as dispensaries, but I think the dispensaries have overtaken it now. But like historically and famously, communities were able to rally around high school football events. And so for me, the notion of making it a competitive event that parents and everyone could go cheer for their people, and that would also pull them out of the game and give them a real thrill, or at least a better simulated thrill, was worth the time and attention to promote. But also, I sell t-shirts.
Well, so I was going to ask you, I mean, are you associated with a church or involved with a small group of any kind, or?
No, I still mainly exist in a digital plane. Like voluntary isolation, especially since it was involuntary for everybody. There was a lot of hope that the building of the information processing part and whatnot was going to flourish, because everybody was being forced into more screen time, and there was a lot more brains and such in the sphere.
Have you thought about expanding your horizons to more real life relationships?
It doesn't feel like an expansion.
Well, yes, I understand that, but it truly is. Because, you know, let's go back to this idea of sacrifice, okay? There's a purpose in sacrifice, right? There's a higher purpose in sacrifice. So let's say, as an example, that you sacrifice some of your time online with great intellect. I'm making fun of myself. Let's say you sacrifice some of that time in order to go out into the community and join a hiking group, or become part of a small group in a church or something like that, where you meet a bunch of people that you don't particularly like, you don't have that much in common with them, but you're willing to submit yourself to the organization of the group in order to maybe learn something about yourself and to serve others. And it's going to feel like a sacrifice. It's probably going to feel like a sacrifice for quite a long time. But over time, what you discover is that you start getting a deeper appreciation for these people that you don't seem to have anything in common with. And you start seeing where there really are parts of you that match up with parts of them. And you start learning a lot of things about yourself, like the places where you're not willing to sacrifice, because our natural tendency is to be incredibly selfish. I mean, the first thing I learned when I got married was how selfish I was. But then I didn't really learn exactly how selfish I was until I had a baby. and then I have to be taking care of this other person all the time. I have no choice about it. Or, you know, and so when you're part of a group of people where you commit to each other and you commit to serving other people, you explore that whole aspect of yourself that's so selfish. And little by little, you can let that get carved away. And you can grow more and more in the avenue of serving people. And that's what we're shaped for. We're shaped to serve one another.
If we're operating at the right frequency.
Yeah.
That does make me like throw back to, I really wanted to bring up Schumann resonance when we were talking about all that other stuff.
Schumann resonance?
Yeah. That's
SCHUMANN?
yes.
The musician or somebody else?
I'm not sure who it's famous for, but it's apparently the frequency at which the earth hums.
Oh, is that the 433 hertz or something? Like
it's like 7.68 megahertz if I remember correctly. But like there's a Twitter feed that monitors the changes in it. And as far as bioelectric communication, I didn't want to not bring it up with everything else we already said.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's the significance of it?
That may be the bandwidth at which the cells are receiving the information from wherever, like the planet, the life sphere we're in. It's apparently the tone the earth hums. And I just thought it may be relevant to all the other things we discussed, and I didn't want to not toss it. I pulled it out of a rabbit hole once.
Yeah.
But I think it might be related.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I had heard that there is some sort of a theory that we used to always tune our instruments to a harmonic that was natural, and then we started tuning them slightly differently. Because
the Rockefellers told us to.
Oh, is that?
I've been down the rabbit holes, Karen.
Rockefellers, they did everything.
If only they'd fund my research, I'd stop saying things about them.
That's hilarious. Yeah, well, I had watched a couple of those videos about the 432 hertz or whatever, and at first it was kind of compelling, and then it was like, oh, come on, you're throwing too many things in that pot, you know. Once you see that everything in the universe all comes down to this one thing, it's like, yeah, okay, not so much.
But that doesn't mean that the thing that they're obfuscating isn't actually a value at an important level.
Yes, I mean, there's probably something to all of this stuff, you know. It all fits somewhere probably, but at a certain point you have to limit. Each of us only has so much bandwidth, and so you have to limit your scope of inquiry to something that you can handle.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes get recommendations from viewers, and I think, yeah, no, I'm not going to go there. I don't have the time or the intellect or the bandwidth or anything else.
But if they brought you a clip from it.
Yeah, 1 minute clip maybe. But then that's the problem. That 1 minute clip can capture your attention, and then you kind of go down the rabbit hole, and then you're lost. Yeah. So I want to get back to this thing about your intellect. So you started school a year early. Was that because?
No, I took a year off after high school because of the age.
But you said you started school a year earlier than the other kids.
Yeah, I was 4 because I was a September child, and school started in September, so I was about to be 5.
Was that kindergarten or first grade?
Yeah, kindergarten.
Well, that's unusual because usually the inclination of parents is to hold their boys back a year because boys don't develop verbally as quickly. And so oftentimes the parents will hold the boys back a year so that they're more kind of in line with everybody else if they have an early birthday like that.
I wasn't raised by parents, so
Okay,
there's
so
that too.
Okay, so can you tell me more about that?
It was my grandmother and my great grandfather lived next door. They didn't recognize me as different until I almost failed the 3rd grade from talking too much. And then in 4th grade, they put me in advanced placement classes. It's nice to feel special. But by the time junior high rolled around, I was just trying to conform and fit in and pursue relationships and be normal. And there was probably a lot of self-sabotage involved in trying to achieve those sorts of things.
Yeah, I understand that. I for a lot of reasons, I couldn't fit in junior high no matter what I did. So I just sort of gave up on that and went ahead and pursued school. But if fitting in is a possibility, I can understand how that would be a tremendous motivation to kind of clamp down on your own natural curiosities and interest in the world. And unfortunately, the internet captured you and gave you all that in one nice little package, and all that gaming gave you a place to explore and
it still does. I mean, like you said, this is a game too. This is the controls are complicated and a lot of it's invisible, but playing with these algorithms and stuff, it's just a different game to me.
Well, when you look at this game that we're playing, what do you think is what would be the ultimate best consequence of it in your mind?
That we can bring young adults up to speed in a timely enough fashion. They don't repeat they don't fall into the traps I did. Like, there's so much wrong think being pumped into everybody's head that, like, for example, I think advertising should be taught in junior high. I think the notion of a defense against the dark arts class, like from J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, like the school was corrupted, so they had to get together and learn together. And essentially so I'm way aged out of it. That's sort of what I'm trying to see happen in our corner is we help each other think and avoid the bad rabbit holes, because people who have already been down there and come back out can, like you said, something can capture your interest and you go down the rabbit hole. But if somebody on the way out drops you a clip of why they're not there anymore, then that can save you a year of interest, a year of content consumption, a year of your life. So coming together, that's the possible benefit I see is like the distributed cognition of online community hive minds. But like the sacrifice could be real life relationships if you're not careful. And there might be recovery from that, but at this point I'm pretty vested, so
well, yeah, may your tribe be multiplied. I mean, this idea of using clips to kind of identify where the potholes are and help people avoid the potholes is terrific. And there's an added benefit to that, and that makes you not just a consumer, but a person who's serving the greater community by doing that, right? And it requires some self-sacrifice to take the time to do that, to learn how to do it, and then to do it effectively in a way that can actually reach people. And you personally, if you could and I say this selfishly, if you could organize the people who could be the clip brigade, so to speak, and teach them the tools that they need, you could gather a lot of people doing this. Because if you look at my content, Paul's content, John Vervaeke's content, Jordan Peterson's content, yours, Chris's, I don't even know all the channels that are out there now. I mean, name some more. Unlimited content going back over 4 years or more.
Yeah, that's just this corner.
Yeah, keep a whole tribe of people busy. And I can't remember who that guy was anymore who made the search engine.
This little corner search engine, yeah.
Yes.
I never tied his name to the project very well either.
Well, I'm ashamed to say that I had a conversation with him, and I can't remember which of the people I had the conversation with that told me he was the guy. But so there's this infinite amount of information out there that could be clipped, and this clip brigade could be sending this stuff out there, get millions of views probably.
I knew you'd understand the army of the 12 monkeys. I knew it.
Yeah.
That's my lobster monkeys.
If somebody could make that happen, and if you did it on just 1 or 2 or 3 channels, you could actually probably drive up your numbers enough to where you'd start making some money on it from YouTube.
Me and YouTube aren't friends. I've been known to make clips they don't want disseminated, but
what if you went with try to avoid the things that get you thrown off, you know?
I'm almost going for it as a merit badge, because there's other platforms, and if I can get people beholding this corner, then maybe there's stuff I can go get I can do a hero's journey, leave the village, and come back with some treasure. So
yeah. Although, I mean, if your goal is to help young people, you kind of got to go where the young people are, which would be what? TikTok. There's still some on YouTube. TikTok, YouTube, what, Reddit?
Mapping out the digital platforms and getting a community where people can bring them from different places is part of it. I think we might hijack ThinkSpot since nobody seems to be doing much with it. But
yeah, but I mean, ThinkSpot only attracts people who are already interested in this world. You want to go to places where people who aren't interested in this world yet are, and then maybe you could grow ThinkSpot when those people come out of the rabbit holes they're in. But
I like working at this level. I think like actually appealing to youth, it would be way too much sacrifice for me. So I'm happy to help lift up other people that see the good and want to learn. And a gold rush sell shovels. So
yeah.
But I have to operate on like Jesus takes care of sparrows and like grace will lead me home. And I can't try to just the way my mind has ended up programmed, I can't focus on trying to make money or if it happens that I'm doing something right, that I'm following the right path. The better I'm taken care of, the more I'm following the right path.
Of course you're right. Of course you're right. It's that marketing side of me that always goes down the wrong. Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm not interested in making money, but that's because I have the benefit of being well cared for by an incredibly inventive and astutely financial managing husband. So, you know.
Well, success also attracts the crowd. So like to the extent you're doing well, is extend your reach of your message. It's not you shouldn't avoid doing the SEO for your descriptions on YouTube either. But like there's different sacrifices.
Well, so where would I go to enhance my SEO? I mean, as far as I know, all I know about on YouTube is in the tag section. I can tag the things and people we're talking about, but other than that, where would I go?
Well, I'm hoping to collect monkeys that enjoy finding out the answer to that and then providing them to talent like yourself. But we're still building
Well,
the
okay, well,
boat.
let's do that then. Let's say anybody who wants to be a lobster monkey and get involved in the clip brigade, they can make a comment in the comment section of this video. And
Yeah, raise your hand. We'll
Yeah.
give you something to do. Thank you so much for your time and attention, Karen. This has been fabulous.
yeah, thank you, Grizz. And we'll keep in touch.
Please.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.